A little homeless girl begged Johnny Depp for help, and what he noticed next would change everything. It all began one sunny afternoon in downtown Los Angeles. Between the towering glass monoliths of the city, Johnny Depp emerged from the grand entrance of an exclusive hotel. The air was alive with the usual urban symphony, car horns blaring in the distance, snippets of hurried conversations, and the faint rumble of a nearby construction site. The bustling scene felt worlds away from the quiet thoughtfulness that lingered behind Johnny's signature sunglasses. Dressed in his distinctive bohemian style, with layered scarves, a hat tilted just so, and bracelets jingling on his wrists, Johnny made his way toward the sleek black limousine waiting at the curb. His trusted chauffeur, Thomas, stood at attention beside the vehicle, his posture formal but welcoming. "Good morning, Mr. Depp," Thomas greeted him, tipping his hat slightly as he opened the rear door with practiced efficiency. "I trust you had a pleasant stay?" Johnny smiled warmly, adjusting the cuffs of his jacket. "Morning, Thomas. It was fine, thank you. Looking forward to getting back home. But we've got that shoot first, don't we?" "Yes, sir. The studio's about 20 minutes away," Thomas confirmed with a nod. Johnny sighed lightly, his mind already shifting to the tasks ahead. He was just about to step into the plush leather interior of the limo when something unexpected happened. A small figure darted out from the crowd, moving with surprising speed. Before Johnny could fully register what was happening, he felt something latch onto his leg. Startled, he looked down. A little girl, no older than 7 or 8, clung to his jeans. Her tiny hands gripped the fabric tightly, and her small frame trembled as though she were cold or scared. Her clothes were tattered, smudged with dirt, and her face, though streaked with grime, revealed delicate features that hinted at a fragile innocence. Most striking of all, her head was completely bald, the skin smooth and bare under the sunlight. Johnny knelt down slowly, his movements careful not to frighten her further. "Hey there," he said softly, his voice calm and soothing. "Are you all right?" The girl didn't respond. Her wide, frightened eyes darted around, scanning the bustling street behind her as if searching for something or someone. She clutched his leg even tighter. "Sir?" Thomas's voice broke the moment. The chauffeur leaned slightly closer, concern evident on his face. "Is everything all right?" Before Johnny could reply, a loud, angry voice rang out. "Hey, get back here, you little thief!" A burly man, red-faced and scowling, pushed his way through the crowd. He pointed an accusatory finger at the girl. "That kid stole an apple from my stand. Just walked up and took it like she owns the place." The girl flinched at the man's words, burying her face against Johnny's leg. She still didn't speak, but her trembling grew more pronounced. Johnny straightened, positioning himself between the girl and the approaching man. His usual relaxed demeanor hardened into something more resolute. "Calm down," he said firmly, holding up a hand. "Let's not make a scene. What's going on here?" "What's going on is that kid stole from me," the man shouted, his voice rising with frustration. "She's been hanging around here for days, begging and stealing from whoever she can. Someone needs to do something about her." Johnny looked down at the girl again. Her head was still pressed against his leg, but now he noticed something he hadn't before. On her wrist, partially hidden beneath the frayed sleeve of her shirt, was a hospital bracelet. His gaze lingered on it for a moment, and a knot of concern tightened in his chest. "I'll take care of it," Johnny said, turning back to the man. "How much for the apple?" The vendor blinked, caught off guard. $2? Johnny reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp $20 bill. He handed it to the man without hesitation. "Here, this should more than cover it." The man hesitated, then took the bill with a grumble. "Fine, but you'd better keep her away from my stand." As the vendor stomped off, Johnny knelt down again, gently placing a hand on the girl's shoulder. "Hey," he said softly, "it's okay now. He's gone. Can you tell me your name?" The girl finally looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Lila." "Lila," Johnny repeated, offering her a reassuring smile. "That's a beautiful name. Are you hungry?" She nodded hesitantly. "All right, let's get you something to eat," Johnny said. He glanced over his shoulder at Thomas. "Can we make a quick stop somewhere?" "Of course, sir," Thomas replied without hesitation. Johnny guided Lila into the limo. her small hand still clutching his. As the car pulled away from the curb, he watched her closely. She seemed nervous, her eyes darting around the lavish interior of the vehicle, as though she didn't quite believe she was there. "Don't worry," Johnny said gently. "You're safe now." As they drove through the city, Johnny asked her more questions, trying to piece together her story. Where were her parents? How long had she been on the streets? Why was she wearing a hospital bracelet? But Lila's answers were vague, her words halting and uncertain. She didn't seem to trust him fully yet. Eventually, they arrived at a quiet diner on the outskirts of town. Johnny led Lila inside, where a kind-looking waitress greeted them and showed them to a booth. Lila sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, as Johnny ordered a stack of pancakes and a glass of milk for her. When the food arrived, she ate ravenously, as though she hadn't had a proper meal in days. Johnny watched her with a mix of sadness and curiosity. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story than she was letting on. As she finished her meal, Lila finally spoke. "Thank you," she said, her voice still quiet but sincere. "You're welcome," Johnny replied. "But I'm still worried about you, Lila. Can you tell me where you've been staying, or if there's someone I can call for you?" Her expression darkened, and she shook her head. "Number? There's no one." Johnny leaned back in his seat, trying to decide what to do next. He couldn't just leave her on the streets, not after what he'd seen. But how could he help her when she wouldn't tell him the whole truth? And then, as he looked at her hospital bracelet again, something clicked. The numbers and letters on it weren't random. They were a patient ID, and beneath them, in tiny print, was the name of a hospital. Without letting Lila see, Johnny quickly took a photo of the bracelet with his phone. He didn't know what he would find, but he was determined to get to the bottom of it. For now, though, he needed to earn her trust. "All right, Lila," he said, offering her a warm smile. "How about we find you a place to rest for the night? Then we can figure out what to do next." Her eyes widened with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Really? Really?" Johnny assured her. As they left the diner, Johnny's mind raced with questions. Who was Lila? Why was she alone on the streets? And what had happened to her that she ended up with a hospital bracelet and nowhere to go? He didn't have the answers yet, but one thing was certain. He wasn't going to let her face this alone. The limousine hummed softly as it glided through the quiet streets. Lila sat beside Johnny, her small hands clutching the hem of her tattered shirt. She seemed calmer now, though her eyes still flickered with a hint of mistrust and fear. Johnny turned to her, his voice gentle. "Lila, I'm taking you somewhere safe, just for tonight. Is that okay?" Lila nodded hesitantly, her bald head bobbing slightly. "Okay," she whispered. Johnny had already decided on their next stop, a cozy, discreet inn he frequented when he needed privacy. It was a place where he knew they wouldn't be disturbed. Thomas pulled into the driveway, and Johnny guided Lila inside. The staff, accustomed to Johnny's presence, didn't bat an eye when he checked in with the young girl by his side. As they entered the room, Lila's gaze darted around, taking in the warm lighting, soft bedding, and clean surroundings. Johnny watched her carefully. She seemed overwhelmed, as if she hadn't been in a space like this in a long time. "You can rest here," Johnny said, pointing to the bed. "There's a bathroom if you want to clean up. No rush." Lila nodded again, her lips pressing into a thin line. She disappeared into the bathroom, and Johnny sat on the edge of the bed, pulling out his phone. He zoomed in on the photo he had taken of her hospital bracelet. The name of the hospital glared back at him. St. Mary's Pediatric Center. He hesitated for a moment, debating whether to call. Finally, he dialed the number. After a few rings, a calm, professional voice answered. "St. Mary's Pediatric Center. How may I assist you?" "Hi," Johnny began, keeping his voice low so Lila wouldn't hear. "I'm calling about a young girl named Lila. I think she might have been one of your patients. She's wearing a hospital bracelet from your facility." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Can you provide the patient ID number on the bracelet?" Johnny quickly read out the series of numbers and letters. "Please hold while I check our records." As the line went silent, Johnny's mind raced. Who was Lila? Why had she been at the hospital? And how had she ended up alone on the streets? The voice returned. "Sir, this patient was discharged 3 months ago. She was undergoing treatment for leukemia. Do you know her current guardian or contact information?" Johnny's chest tightened. Leukemia. That explained the bald head, the frail frame. No, he admitted. She told me she doesn't have anyone. She's on the streets. A sharp intake of breath came from the other end. That's unusual. She was released into the care of a guardian. If she's on the streets, something must have gone wrong. I strongly suggest contacting social services. Johnny frowned. He didn't trust the idea of handing Lila over to a system that might have already failed her. Thanks for the information, he said curtly before ending the call. The bathroom door creaked open and Lila stepped out. She was wearing a fluffy white robe from the hotel, her small figure almost swallowed by its size. Her face looked cleaner now, her features more delicate and vulnerable. Feel better? Johnny asked, smiling gently. She nodded, her eyes meeting his for the first time with a flicker of trust. Thank you, she said softly. Lila, Johnny began carefully, I called the hospital. They told me you were there for treatment. Can you tell me what happened? Why aren't you with your family? Her face fell and she looked away, tears welling in her eyes. They left, she whispered. They said they couldn't take care of me anymore. Johnny's heart broke at her words. He leaned forward, his voice steady. Lila, I'm so sorry, but you don't have to go through this alone. I want to help you. She wiped her eyes with the oversized sleeve of the robe. Why? She asked, her voice trembling. Why do you care? Johnny hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Because no one should have to go through what you're going through, especially not a child. You deserve to be safe and loved. Lila's lips quivered, and for a moment, Johnny thought she might break down. But instead she nodded, a small spark of hope returning to her eyes. The next morning, Johnny made a decision. He wasn't going to leave Lila's future to chance. After breakfast, he placed a call to a close friend, a lawyer named Rebecca who specialized in child advocacy cases. Johnny, this is a complicated situation, Rebecca said after he explained everything. If her guardians abandoned her, they could face serious consequences. But more importantly, we need to ensure she's placed somewhere safe. I want to help her, Johnny said firmly, whatever it takes. Rebecca promised to begin the legal process, but it would take time. In the meantime, Johnny focused on making Lila feel secure. He took her shopping for new clothes, letting her pick out whatever she liked. At first, she seemed hesitant, but as the day went on, her laughter began to bubble up, filling the spaces between their conversations. For the first time in what felt like forever, Lila looked like a child again. A week later, Rebecca called with an update. Johnny, I've got good news. We've located a foster family that specializes in caring for children with medical needs. They're willing to take Lila in. Johnny's chest tightened. He had grown attached to the little girl, her resilience and bravery inspiring him every day. But he knew this was what was best for her. When he told Lila about the foster family, she looked at him with wide, tearful eyes. Will I still see you? She asked. Johnny knelt down, placing a hand on her shoulder. Of course, Lila. I'll always be here for you. This isn't goodbye. As he watched Lila settle into her new home, surrounded by warmth and care, Johnny felt a deep sense of peace. He had done what he set out to do. He had given her a chance at a better life. And as he walked away that day, he couldn't help but smile, knowing that sometimes the smallest actions could make the biggest difference.